Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to explore these fascinating topics.
Okay, so today we're going to dive into the world of Monica Bellucci.
Oh, interesting choice. I'm intrigued.
Yeah. We're going to be looking at the pressures of being a cinematic icon, especially for women.
The pressures of fame, especially for women in Hollywood.
Oh.
Definitely a topic worth exploring.
And get this, our main source is an article about Bellucci. It's from, the Turin Film Festival.
Okay, Turin. What was she doing there? Promoting something new?
Yeah, she was promoting a documentary, actually. It's about Anita Ekberg.
Ah, the legendary Swedish actress. Famous for, well, many things, but that iconic Trevi Fountain scene, right?
Exactly, La Dolce Vita. But here's what makes this deep dive so interesting.
I'm all ears.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
Well, Bellucci is, considered a modern-day screen siren herself.
Right, absolutely. That smoldering Italian beauty. She's definitely got that classic Hollywood glamour.
Right. But she's talking about the downsides of this iconic status, especially for women like, Ekberg experienced.
That's a really interesting angle. Like, she's inheriting this legacy, but also analyzing it critically.
Yeah. And there's this quote from the article. Bellucci says, and I'm quoting here, "Being an icon like Anita Ekberg is dangerous. They put you in a glass case and you don't come out again."
Wow. A glass case. What a powerful image. It really makes you think about those expectations that come with that level of fame. Like, you're constantly on display.
It really does. And, it makes me think, especially for female stars in the past.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Back then, they were often reduced to their looks. Like, their talent and personality were secondary.
Right. It's like their value was tied to their appearance, and they were expected to maintain that image forever.
And that's just not realistic. Right?
Yeah.
People change, they evolve.
Right.
But the glass case metaphor, it's like they were frozen in time.
Yeah, like they were expected to be ageless. Not to age gracefully, but literally to not age.
Right. And I think that pressure was even more intense for women than for men.
Because, men, as they aged, they could become, distinguished or, more handsome.
Exactly. It was seen as a positive for men. But for women, aging was often seen as a decline.
Yeah, they were losing their value. And that makes you wonder, how did actresses even navigate their careers back then?
It must have been incredibly tough, especially in those early decades of Hollywood, like the 50s and 60s when Ekberg was at her peak.
Because what Bellucci is saying about Ekberg, it seems like breaking free from that image was almost impossible.
Right. The studio system had a very specific idea of what a female star should be, how she should look, how she should behave.
So it's not just about being beautiful, it's about fitting into this mold.
Exactly. And the film industry, especially back then, was heavily male-dominated.
Oh, completely. So you can imagine the limited roles available to women.
Right. They are often typecast. The blonde bombshell, the girl next door, the femme fatale. Very stereotypical.
And if they didn't fit those types, what then?
They were often overlooked.
Yeah.
Or they were criticized for trying to break out of those molds.
So it's like a double bind, right? You're valued for your beauty, but then you're punished if you try to be anything more than that.
Exactly. And it's not just about the roles they were offered, but how they were treated off screen, too.
Oh, for sure. Their public image, their personal lives, everything was scrutinized.
Right. And anything they did that didn't fit the expected image could be used against them.
So this glass case, it's about so much more than just looks, isn't it?
It really is. It's about control, about limiting women's agency and power.
Yeah, and that makes Bellucci's comments even more thought-provoking because she's saying things are changing for actresses today.
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? Are things really that different now?
Right, because we are seeing more diversity on screen, more roles for women, more women behind the camera.
And definitely more acceptance of women aging naturally. Think about Meryl Streep. She's still getting amazing roles.
Yeah, that's true. But has that shift really broken the glass case completely? Or is it just, a different shape now?
That's the million-dollar question. Because Bellucci becoming the oldest Bond girl ever at 50, that felt significant.
It did. It felt like a real turning point. But is it true progress, or is it just a new version of the same old problem?
I think that's what Bellucci's trying to get us to think about. Because even as we see these positive changes, there are still limitations.
Maybe the expectations are just different now. More subtle, maybe.
Exactly. And it's important to acknowledge that those pressures can come from within, too. Women can internalize those expectations.
That's such a good point. So it's not just about the industry, it's about how we view ourselves.
Right. and how we internalize those messages about what's considered beautiful, successful, desirable.
And that makes this whole conversation even more relevant for everyone, right? Because it's not just about Hollywood actresses.
Not at all. It's about all of us and how we navigate those societal pressures.
And how we define success and fulfillment for ourselves on our own terms. Which brings us to a really fascinating detail in this article.
Oh, I'm hooked. Tell me more.
So get this, Bellucci is actually playing like a Mediterranean beauty in this documentary about Ekberg.
Wow. The parallels are pretty striking, aren't they? Both celebrated for their beauty, both chosen for roles that emphasize it.
Right, and Bellucci calls the documentary the bittersweet story of a star who lived at the wrong time.
The wrong time. I wonder what she means by that. Like, was Ekberg limited by the norms of her era?
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you think maybe her beauty, while celebrated, also became a kind of trap.
That's a really insightful point. Like, it defined her in a way that maybe prevented her from exploring her full potential.
Right. So even though she achieved this iconic status, there's this sense of, like, sadness or unfulfilled potential.
Like she was trapped in that glass case.
Right. It makes you wonder if true fulfillment for actors and for all of us comes from breaking free from those expectations.
Like defining success on our own terms, not on the terms dictated by society or the industry.
Exactly. And Bellucci becoming the oldest Bond girl ever, it kind of challenges that, doesn't it?
It does. Like, is that a sign of progress or just a different form of pressure? It's definitely something to ponder. It's kind of like Bellucci saying Ekberg was born in the wrong era, you know?
Yeah, if she was acting today, things would be different.
Maybe. But what were the specific challenges back then? I think we got to unpack that a little more.
Totally. We kind of skimmed over that, didn't we? So 1950s, 1960s Hollywood, what was it actually like for women?
Well, research on films from that time, it shows that female characters were mostly supporting roles.
Ah, so not the main characters, the leads.
Right. Or they were defined by their relationship to a man, like the wife, the girlfriend.
Not a whole lot of depth there.
Exactly. Very few chances for women to play, complex, interesting characters, with their own agency.
So that glass case thing, it really limited their career options.
Big time. It's almost like their talent was ignored. All that mattered was their looks.
And probably their, obedience. I mean, if they stepped out of line.
Totally. A great example is, the difference in how critics talked about actors back then.
Okay, explain that.
Male actors were praised for their range, their ability to transform for a role.
Mm-hmm.
But for actresses,
it was all about beauty.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Reviews would focus on their looks, their charm. They rarely got credit for their actual acting skills.
Wow, so that glass case was everywhere, even in how their performances were judged.
Exactly. And this makes Bellucci's career even more impressive when you think about it.
Right. She hasn't just done romantic comedies or whatever. She's really mixed it up.
She has. Art house films, big Hollywood blockbusters. She's played all sorts of characters.
And hasn't she done some controversial roles too, pushing the boundaries a bit?
Oh yeah. Remember that movie Irreversible? Came out in 2002. That was a really tough, thought-provoking role.
I haven't seen it. Is it graphic or something?
It's intense, for sure. But it sparked this huge debate, right? Some people thought it was exploiting her, using her beauty in a bad way.
And others were applauding her for taking on such a difficult role.
Exactly. And it just shows that this glass case idea is complicated. Even when an actress is trying to break free, those assumptions about her are still there.
Right. It's like you said, it's not black and white. It's not like all roles were bad back then, and now they're all amazing.
Exactly. The glass case can take on all sorts of forms, And it's important for us as viewers, as consumers of media.
To be more aware of it.
Yes. To be critical. Really think about what we're seeing on screen.
So how do we do that? What questions should we be asking ourselves when we watch a film?
Well, I think the first thing is to remember that what we see on screen, it's often very carefully constructed.
Ah, so it's not always reality. It's a story that someone's telling.
Right, and there's always a perspective, So ask yourself, who's telling this story? Whose point of view are we seeing?
Okay, that makes sense. And what about the female characters? What should we be looking for there?
Pay attention to how they're portrayed, Is she a full person with her own thoughts, her own goals, or is she just there to support a male character?
Oh, so is she just the wife or the girlfriend with no real depth to her character?
Exactly. Or is she a complex individual with agency? making her own choices, influencing the story.
So basically, look beyond the surface. Don't just take the images and the story at face value.
Right. Think about, like, the power dynamics, the historical context.
Yep.
What are the filmmakers trying to say?
And don't forget the glass case. Like, is that present in some way? How is it affecting the female characters?
Totally. And it's not just limited to film, right?
Yeah.
Think about all the media we consume, ads, TV shows, music videos.
Yeah. And like social media too, it's everywhere.
Exactly. And that's kind of scary because it can really mess with our heads, can't it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like we start to believe those images, those expectations.
And that can lead to, like, internalizing the glass case, right?
You mean women putting that pressure on themselves, even if no one else is doing it?
Exactly. And that's when it gets really tricky, because it's not just about external forces anymore. It's about how we see ourselves.
And like, are we making choices based on what we truly want or what we think we should be doing?
Right. Are we being authentic, or are we just performing a role?
Whoa, that's deep. So how do we break free from that, both the external pressures and the stuff we internalize?
That's the big question, isn't it? And I think Bellucci's career is a good example of, like, challenging the status quo.
Yeah, she's taken risks, played different kinds of roles. But even she seems to be saying it's not easy to escape the glass case completely.
Yeah, it's a constant struggle. But her story shows that progress is possible. It's about pushing boundaries,
And not being afraid to, like, make mistakes, maybe. To try something different and see what happens.
Totally. And also, like, recognizing that success can look different for everyone. There's no one right way to do things.
And that's a great message, right? Because it's not just for actors, it's for everyone. Like, finding your own definition of success.
Absolutely. And being true to yourself, which is kind of what this whole conversation's been about, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. Like, for a long time, the discussion about women in film was all about the negatives, the challenges, the limitations, all that.
Right. But now it feels like we're seeing a shift. More focus on, like, agency, empowerment.
Yeah, women speaking out, making their own choices, telling their own stories.
And redefining beauty, showing that there's not just one way to be beautiful.
And hopefully encouraging all of us, men and women, to break free from those expectations.
Totally. Like, to embrace our individuality, our flaws, all of it.
Love that. Speaking of beauty, I wanted to circle back to Bellucci's quote about Ekberg living in the wrong time.
Yeah. What do you think would have been different for Ekberg if she was acting today?
It's hard to say, right? But it's interesting to imagine, like, what if she had access to the roles we see now?
Yeah. Or if she had social media, could she have controlled her own narrative more?
Right. How would that have changed things? It's like the whole context is different now. The industry, the culture, everything.
Totally. And it reminds us that, like, progress isn't always a straight line. There are always going to be new challenges, new forms of the glass case.
So even as we celebrate the progress, we got to stay aware.
Yeah.
And keep pushing for more change.
Absolutely. That's the key takeaway. We got to stay engaged, keep the conversation going.
Okay, so let's get back to Monica Bellucci, shall we?
Yeah, let's dive into her career. Like, how has she handled this glass case thing?
Because she's famous for her beauty, right?
Yeah.
But she's also chosen roles that, like, challenge how we think about beauty.
That's what's so interesting about her, right? It's almost like she's been fighting those limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah,
she hasn't just played the typical beautiful woman roles.
Right. Like, even going back to her modeling days, she started modeling when she was super young, right?
Yeah, like late teens, I think.
And that industry, it's all about, like, looks, right? But she used it as a way to get into acting.
And in interviews, she actually talks about how modeling helped her,
Really? How so?
She said it taught her to be more self-possessed. Like, she learned to control her image.
Instead of letting it control her.
Exactly. And I think that shows in her film choices. She doesn't always play the glamorous, seductive type.
She's done it all. Historical figures, fantasy characters, even, like, down-to-earth roles.
And she's not afraid to age on screen, which is pretty rare for an actress, especially in Hollywood.
Yeah. And she's okay with playing characters who are, like, flawed. Not perfect.
Not just the likable ones.
Right. Like, think about Irreversible again. Some people thought that movie exploited her.
Because of the nature of the role?
Yeah. It's a very intense film. But others were like, wow, she's so brave for taking on such a difficult part.
So even when she's pushing boundaries, there's still this debate about, like, is she reinforcing or challenging the glass case?
It's complicated. And I think it shows that even with the best intentions, it's tough to completely break free from those expectations.
It always comes back to the glass case in one way or another.
Yeah. But, it seems like Bellucci is making her own choices. She's not trying to please everyone.
Right. She's following her own path and maybe forcing us to rethink our own ideas about beauty and aging and what we expect from women on screen.
Totally. And I think her willingness to take those risks, that's what makes her so inspiring. To me, anyway.
Yeah, she's not letting the glass case define her, which is a great message for all of us, right?
Absolutely. It's okay to be different, to break the mold,
Yeah.
to define success on your own terms.
Exactly. And, it's not just about women either. It's for everyone who feels trapped by expectations.
Yeah, those pressures to conform, to fit in.
To be what other people want you to be, instead of being yourself.
Right. And that's the thing, isn't it? True happiness, true fulfillment, it comes from being authentic, from embracing who you really are.
Which is a perfect way to wrap up this deep dive, I think.
Yeah, I agree. We've covered a lot, haven't we?
We have. From the history of Hollywood to the pressures on women to the glass case metaphor.
And how all of this applies to our lives, even if we're not famous actresses.
Exactly. So, listener, what are your glass cases? What expectations are holding you back? What can you do to break free?
And remember, it's okay to be different, to challenge the status quo, to make your own rules.
Because the world needs your unique voice, your authentic self.
So go out there and shine.
That's it for this deep dive. We hope you'll join us next time for more fascinating discussions.